Hey guys, tonight we're diving into one of history's most terrifying scenarios, the thunderous approach of Mongol cavalry across the steppes, their war cries echoing through valleys as entire civilizations crumble beneath their hooves. You can almost hear the distant drums of war, the clash of steel, and the desperate whispers of villagers who know death is riding toward them at breakneck speed. The year is 1211. And you're standing in a small Chinese village, watching the horizon, darkened with dust clouds that spell doom for everyone you've ever known. Let's be honest, your odds of surviving what's coming are about as good as a snowflake in a forge fire dot. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments below. I love seeing where all of you are tuning in from around the world. Now, let's find that cozy spot, pull a blanket around you, and gently drift into tonight's calm adventure. You're awakened by the sound of distant thunder, but there are no clouds in the sky. The sound grows louder, more rhythmic, until you realize with growing dread that it's not thunder at all. It's the drumbeat of 10,000 horses galloping across the northern plains. The Mongol army approaches like a force of nature, unstoppable and merciless, and you have perhaps hours before they reach your village walls. Your name is Chun Wei, and you're a farmer in the village of Shouping, nestled in the fertile valleys south of the Great Wall. It's a peaceful place where children play in rice paddies, and elderly men gather to play xiangqi under the shade of ancient willows. But peace is about to shatter like porcelain dropped on stone, because Genghis Khan's war machine is bearing down on you with the fury of 1,000 storms. You rush to the village center, where the headman, Old Master Liu, is already addressing a crowd of terrified faces. His weathered hands shake as he speaks, but his voice carries the authority of someone who has seen dynasties rise and fall. The scouts have returned, he announces, his words cutting through the morning air like a blade. The Mongols will be here by sunset. They number more than all the stars in the sky, and their appetite for conquest knows no bounds. The crowd erupts in panic. Some villagers cry out for immediate evacuation. Others demand that you fight, and a few fall to their knees in prayer. But you notice something curious. Old Master Liu isn't panicking. His eyes hold a strange gleam, as if he possesses knowledge that others lack. You push through the crowd until you're close enough to hear his whispered words to the village elders. There is another way, he says, his voice barely audible above the chaos. My grandfather told me stories from the time of Genghis Khan's first campaigns. Some villages survived not by fighting, not by running, but by convincing the Mongols. They were already dead. The concept seems absurd at first. How do you convince an army of seasoned warriors that an entire village has perished? But as Old Master Liu explains the strategy his grandfather witnessed decades ago, the plan begins to take shape in your mind like ink spreading through water. You see, a Mongol war machine was built for efficiency above all else. When Genghis Khan's generals swept across territories, they followed strict protocols designed to maximize conquest while minimizing wasted time and resources. Living settlements required either subjugation, which meant leaving behind administrators, and garrison troops, or complete destruction, which required time, effort, and precious arrows. But dead settlements? Dead settlements could be bypassed entirely, left as monuments to Mongol power while the army pressed forward to more valuable targets. The strategy your village is about to attempt relies on an intimate understanding of Mongol psychology and tactical doctrine. You're not just going to lie down and hope for the best. You're going to stage an elaborate deception that plays directly into their expectations and operational priorities. Old Master Liu gathers the village leaders in his courtyard, spreading out a detailed map of Xiaoping drawn on rice paper. Listen carefully, he begins, his finger tracing the village boundaries. The Mongols expect to find one of three things when they arrive: a village ready to surrender, a village prepared to fight, or a village already destroyed by disease, famine, or previous raids. We're going to give them the third option. The plan requires meticulous preparation and split-second timing. First, you'll need to create evidence of mass death that will satisfy Mongol scouts conducting preliminary reconnaissance. This means digging graves, lots of them, in the cemetery beyond the village walls. The graves must appear fresh, but not too fresh, suggesting death occurred days or weeks ago, rather than hours. You join dozens of other villagers in the cemetery, your hands blistering as you dig through the hard-packed earth. The work is backbreaking, but fear gives you strength you didn't know you possessed. Each grave must be precisely crafted deep enough to convince casual inspection, but not so deep that the deception becomes obvious to experienced warriors who have seen countless battlefields. As you dig, Old Master Lu shares more details of the strategy. The key, he explains, wiping sweat from his brow, is authenticity. The Mongols have seen every trick, every desperate gambit. They can spot fake defenses, hidden weapons, and concealed valuables from a mile away. But they also understand death intimately. They know what a plague-ravaged village looks like, how bodies decompose in different weather conditions, and what signs indicate recent mass casualties. The graves are just the beginning. Your village must appear to have been struck by sudden, overwhelming disaster. Perhaps plague, perhaps poisoned wells, perhaps a raid by bandits that left no survivors to tell the tale. Every detail must support this narrative, from the positioning of abandoned belongings to the subtle signs of hasty burial. You spend the afternoon gathering props for your elaborate performance. Clothing is scattered strategically around houses to suggest people died where they stood or crawled to their homes in final moments. Cook fires are extinguished and left with burnt remains of meals, indicating death interrupted daily life without warning. Tools are dropped in fields as if workers simply collapsed mid-task. The most challenging aspect of the deception involves the animals. Living livestock would immediately betray your ruse, but completely absent animals might seem suspicious to scouts familiar with village life. The solution requires careful choreography. Some animals must appear to have died alongside their human caretakers, while others must seem to have wandered away to survive in the wild, as animals do when their handlers perish. You help drive the village's valuable animals, oxen, horses, and pigs, into hidden valleys several miles away, where they'll be tended by a handful of young villagers who will remain concealed until the Mongols pass. The remaining animals, mostly chickens and old goats of little value, are sacrificed to lend authenticity to the death scene. Their bodies are positioned around the village to suggest disease or poisoning claimed all life indiscriminately. As the sun reaches its zenith, Old Master Lu calls everyone together for the most crucial part of the briefing. When the Mongols arrive, he says, his voice grave with the weight of collective survival, you will be dead. Not pretending to be. Dead, actually dead, in every way that matters. Dead people don't breathe visibly. Dead people don't twitch when insects crawl on their faces. Dead people don't react to sounds, no matter how loud or threatening. The psychological challenge of playing dead under such circumstances cannot be overstated. You're not just lying still for a few minutes while children play hide and seek. You must maintain absolute immobility while heavily armored warriors on horseback circle your prone form, perhaps prodding you with spear points or testing your reflexes with sudden loud noises. The Mongols are experts at detecting deception, and a single involuntary flinch could doom not just you, but every person in Xiaoping. You practice the death pose throughout the afternoon, learning to control your breathing so thoroughly that your chest barely rises and falls. You train yourself to ignore the instinctive urge to swat at flies or adjust uncomfortable positions. Most importantly, You prepare your mind for the terror that will come when you hear Mongol voices discussing your apparently lifeless body in a language you don't understand. The positioning of bodies throughout the village requires strategic thinking that would impress military tacticians. You can't simply have everyone lying in the streets. That would suggest a battle, which might prompt the Mongols to search for hidden survivors or buried treasure. Instead, bodies must be distributed in patterns consistent with plague or mass poisoning, with family groups clustered in homes and individuals collapsed in locations, suggesting they were going about normal activities when death struck. You're assigned to play a farmer who died while tending his vegetable garden. Your position, carefully rehearsed, has you lying face down between rows of cabbage with your hand still clutching a harvesting knife. The pose must look natural, as if you simply collapsed mid-task and never rose again. Around you, other villagers take their positions, a mother cradling her infant near the well, an elderly man slumped over his chessboard, children scattered. Around a playground where their games ended forever. As afternoon shadows lengthen, the final preparations intensify. Faces and exposed skin are dusted with ash and clay to simulate the pallor of death. Clothing is strategically torn and stained to suggest the ravages of disease or violence. Hair is matted with mud and debris. The transformation is so complete that when you catch glimpses of your fellow villagers in their death poses, genuine chills run down your spine. The sound of approaching hoofbeats begins as a whisper in the distance, like wind through wheat fields. But you recognize the rhythm immediately. This is no gentle breeze. This is the measured cadence of professional cavalry maintaining formation across open ground. The Mongol vanguard is perhaps an hour away, close enough that their scouts may already be observing your village through the gathering dusk. Old Master Lu makes his final rounds, checking each corpse for authenticity and offering last-minute adjustments. When he reaches your position in the garden, he kneels beside you and whispers words that will echo in your memory forever. Remember, Chun Wei, you are not pretending to be dead. You are dead. Your spirit has already departed for the afterlife, and only your empty shell remains. Let that truth fill your mind completely, and the Mongols will see nothing but another casualty in their wake of conquest. The waiting begins in earnest as full darkness settles over Xiaoping. You lie motionless in the garden, feeling the cool earth against your cheek and the weight of responsibility pressing down like a physical force. Every person in this village is depending on your ability to remain absolutely still, no matter what horrors unfold around you. The stakes couldn't be higher. Discovery means not just your death, but the massacre of everyone you've ever known. The first Mongol scout appears silently, like a shadow given form. You don't see him directly, but you sense his presence through subtle changes in the night, sounds the way crickets fall silent in his wake, how small animals freeze when predators draw near. He moves through the village periphery with the careful steps of a professional soldier, noting details that will determine whether his army bypasses this place or investigates further. You hear the soft whisper of leather against fabric as the scout dismounts, followed by nearly silent footsteps approaching your section of the village. Your training takes over, and you sink deeper into the death meditation old Master Liu taught you. You are not Chun Wei the farmer. You are not a living person at all. You are nothing but cooling flesh and stiffening joints, as much a part of the landscape as the stones and dirt around you. The footsteps stop mere inches from your head. You feel rather than see the scout crouching beside you, examining your prone form with professional interest. The urge to open your eyes to see what's happening is almost overwhelming. But dead people don't satisfy curiosity, and you remain perfectly still even when you feel the tip of a knife testing the space between your ribs. The scout moves on after what feels like an eternity, but was probably only seconds. You hear him, checking other bodies with the same methodical thoroughness, occasionally murmuring observations in the Mongol tongue. His tone suggests neither surprise nor suspicion, just the routine notation of another settlement claimed by the hardships of medieval life. After perhaps an hour of investigation, the scout remounts and disappears into the darkness. But you know this is only the beginning. Scout reports will be analyzed by Mongol commanders who have conquered half the known world, and they don't accept surface appearances without verification. The main force will arrive soon, and their examination will be far more thorough than a single rider's preliminary survey. The sound returns just before dawn, not the whisper of a single scout, but the thunder of an army in motion. Hundreds of horses, thousands of warriors, and the creaking of siege engines create a symphony of impending destruction that seems to shake the very earth beneath your prone form. The Mongol war machine approaches Zhaoting like a storm front, dark and inexorable against the lightning sky. You've been lying motionless for hours now, and your body screams with cramps and stiffness. Your left arm has gone completely numb from its position beneath your torso, and insects have discovered the sweet scent of the honey and fermented fruit juice you applied to simulate bodily decomposition. Ants crawl across your face in orderly lines, exploring every crevice, but you cannot react. The dead feel no discomfort from such minor annoyances. The army halts just outside the village, and you hear the organized sounds of a military force, establishing temporary positions. Commands in Mongol echo across the morning air, followed by the responses of disciplined soldiers, arranging themselves according to practiced protocols. These are not raiders or bandits. This is the most effective military machine in human history, and they're about to determine whether your village lives or dies. A group of officers approaches on horseback, their conversation audible, even though you can't understand their words. The tone suggests professional assessment rather than excitement or bloodlust. They're examining Xu Ping with the dispassionate eye of experienced conquerors, weighing potential value against operational costs. One voice rises above the others clearly, a senior commander giving instructions to subordinates. You hear horses moving throughout the village as systematic inspection begins. This won't be the cursory examination conducted by the scout. This will be a thorough investigation designed to uncover any deception, locate hidden valuables, and ensure no threats remain concealed. The first test comes when you hear approaching hoofbeats, accompanied by the distinctive sound of armor and weapons. A group of Mongol warriors is conducting house-to-house searches, checking each building for survivors, supplies, or anything of military value. Their footsteps echo through nearby houses as they overturn furniture, probe walls for hidden compartments, and test floors for concealed storage spaces. You hear them approaching the garden where you lie among the vegetables, still clutching. Your harvesting knife in a death grip that's become all too real as your hand cramps around the handle. Multiple sets of footsteps surround you, and you feel the ground vibrate as heavy men in armor examine your prone form from various angles. One warrior says something in Mongol that prompts laughter from his companions. You don't understand words, but the tone suggests dark humor perhaps. A joke about farmers who died with their hands still dirty from working soil they'll never see again. The laughter is not cruel, merely the professional gallows humor of soldiers who have seen death in countless forms across numerous campaigns. A spear point prods your ribs, testing for reflexive responses. The metal is cold against your skin, even through your clothing, and the pressure is firm enough to be genuinely uncomfortable. But you remain perfectly still, channeling old Master Liu's teachings about embracing the reality of death so completely that your body genuinely behaves. Like an empty vessel dot, the warriors move on to examine other bodies in the garden, and you hear similar testing throughout the village. Spear points probe suspicious forms. Voices call out in Mongol as if trying to startle hidden survivors into revealing themselves. And occasionally there are sounds suggesting warriors are overturning objects or searching through possessions. Morning sun climbs higher, and your position becomes increasingly uncomfortable as heat builds in your dark clothing and the stone-hard ground seems to develop new sharp edges beneath your prone form. Sweat beads on your skin despite your motionless state, and you worry that perspiration might betray the deception. But you remember old Master Liu's words about recently deceased bodies still producing some moisture, and you force yourself to trust in the plan's authenticity. A new sound reaches your ears, the approach of someone clearly important, judging by the deference in voices around him. Heavy footsteps accompanied by the clink of expensive armor suggest a high-ranking officer, perhaps even one of Genghis Khan's trusted generals. This man will have experience that makes regular warriors look like children, and his assessment could determine not just your village's fate, but potentially the success or failure of the entire deception strategy. You hear him speaking in measured tones, asking questions that prompt detailed responses from his subordinates. Though you can't understand the words, the conversation's rhythm suggests comprehensive reporting, scout observations, search results, tactical assessments, and recommendations for next steps. Your life hangs on whether this discussion concludes with orders to bypass Choping or investigate further. The general approaches your section of the garden, and you feel his presence like a weight pressing down from above. This is a man who has commanded armies across continents, who has seen every possible form of military deception, who can read landscapes and situations with the precision of a scholar interpreting ancient texts. If anyone can see through your village's desperate gambit, it will be him. He stands directly over you for what feels like hours, but is probably only minutes, studying your prone form with the analytical mind of a professional warrior. You feel his gaze moving across your body, noting the position of your limbs, the angle of your head, the way your clothing is settled around your form. Every detail is being evaluated against his vast experience with battlefield casualties and plague victims. The general says something that prompts one of his subordinates to approach with a long spear. You hear the weapon being positioned, and then the point descends toward your back with controlled force. This isn't the casual testing you experienced earlier. This is a deliberate attempt to provoke involuntary responses that would indicate life where none should exist. The spear point presses against your spine just below the shoulder blades, applying steadily increasing pressure. The discomfort builds to genuine pain, but you embrace it as confirmation of your death meditation's effectiveness. Pain is for the living, and you have transcended such mortal concerns. The pressure continues until you're certain the weapon will pierce your skin, but you remain absolutely motionless. Satisfied with your lack of response, the general moves to examine other bodies with the same methodical thoroughness. You hear the testing being repeated throughout the village spear points, probing motionless forms, voices calling out in various languages to test for recognition, and the systematic investigation of every house and hiding place. The examination continues for what seems like an eternity. The sun climbs toward its zenith, and your position in the open garden becomes almost unbearable as heat builds in the still air. Your mouth is parched, your muscles scream with cramps, and every fiber of your being cries out for movement. But movement means discovery, and discovery means not just your death, but the massacre of everyone who trusted in this desperate plan. You hear horses moving throughout, Zhao Ping as mounted warriors conduct broader searches of the surrounding area. They're checking the cemetery where your carefully prepared graves await inspection, examining the fields where abandoned tools and scattered belongings tell the story of sudden catastrophe, and investigating the animal pens where strategic casualties lend authenticity to the death scene. The sounds from the cemetery are particularly nerve-wracking. You hear horses circling the freshly dug graves, followed by dismounted warriors examining the burial sites more closely. Voices rise and fall in discussion and you strain to interpret their tone. Suspicion would mean disaster, but casual acceptance would confirm the deception's success. After what feels like hours of investigation, you hear the distinctive sound of a Mongol war horn echoing across the valley. The call is answered by horns throughout the army, and suddenly the organized sounds of military movement resume. Orders are shouted, horses stamp and snort as riders mount, and the great war machine begins to move again, but you don't dare move. Yet, Old Master Liu warned that Mongol armies sometimes left behind observers to watch for signs of deception after the main force departed. You must remain dead until you're absolutely certain no Mongol eyes are watching Xi Fing, even if that means lying motionless for hours longer. The sounds of the army fade gradually, like thunder moving away after a storm. Hoofbeats become distant whispers, voices dissolve into silence, and eventually, even the creaking of siege engines disappears beyond the horizon. But still you wait, counting your heartbeats and listening for any sound that might indicate concealed observers. The sun begins its descent toward the western mountains before you hear the soft whistle that signals all clear. Old Master Liu's voice, barely audible, calls out the code phrase that means the deception has succeeded. The harvest moon rises on empty fields. Only then do you allow yourself to believe that you've survived one of the most dangerous gambles. In military history, that rising from your death pose is like being reborn. Your muscles scream as circulation returns to cramped limbs. Your vision swims as you lift your head for the first time in nearly 12 hours. And your throat burns with thirst accumulated during your motionless vigil. But you're alive, and, more importantly, everyone in Xiaoping is alive. The village slowly comes back to life, as people emerge from their death poses like flowers blooming after winter. Children who played dead in their parents' arms stretch and yawn. Elderly folks who lay motionless for hours groan as they work feeling back into stiff joints. And workers who collapsed in fields brush dirt from their clothes and look around. In amazement, Old Master Liu moves through the village checking on everyone, his weathered face showing exhaustion, but also profound relief. The strategy worked exactly as his grandfather described from the early days of Mongol expansion. By presenting the appearance of a settlement already claimed by disaster, Xiaoping convinced one of history's most efficient military forces that no further action was necessary. But the success comes with sobering realities. The Mongol army will return this way eventually, possibly within days or weeks as they complete their campaign circuit. The deception bought time, not permanent safety, and the village must use that time wisely to either relocate to safer territory or prepare more conventional defenses. You gather with other villagers to hear Old Master Liu's analysis of what happened during the army's investigation. His observations, gleaned from careful listening during the examination, provide crucial insights into how closely the deception came to failure and what elements proved most convincing to Mongol scrutiny. They spent considerable time examining the cemetery, he reports, his voice hoarse from hours of motionless silence. The freshly dug graves were exactly what they expected to find in a village struck by sudden plague. The positioning of bodies throughout the settlement told a coherent story of rapid mortality that overwhelmed normal burial practices. The success of specific details reveals the sophistication of Mongol military intelligence. They noted the abandoned meals that suggested death interrupted daily life. They examined animal casualties to confirm disease affected all living things equally. And they even tested the consistency of soil in graves to verify recent excavation. Every element of the deception had to withstand professional scrutiny from experienced conquerors. Perhaps most importantly, the psychological element proved as crucial as physical evidence. The Mongol assessment relied not just on what they saw, but on what they expected to see based on countless previous encounters with plague-ravaged settlements. By matching those expectations precisely, Zhao Ping's deception exploited the cognitive shortcuts that even experienced warriors use when processing routine situations. The celebration that night is subdued, tempered by awareness that survival came at enormous cost in stress, preparation, and risk. Several villagers suffered injuries from maintaining unnatural positions for hours. Others experienced psychological trauma from the intense fear of discovery. And everyone understands that luck played as large a role as planning in the deceptions. Success.old Master Liu shares more stories from his grandfather's experiences during the early Mongol campaigns, revealing that Xiaoping's strategy wasn't unique. Multiple Chinese villages attempted similar deceptions, with varying degrees of success depending on their preparation, execution, and the particular circumstances of their encounters with Mongol forces. Some villages failed because their death scenes lacked authenticity, bodies positioned unrealistically, evidence of recent activity contradicting the plague narrative, or insufficient attention to details that experienced warriors would notice immediately. Others succeeded so completely that they were forgotten by history, their survival unrecorded because successful deceptions leave no traces for chroniclers to discover. The strategy's effectiveness depended heavily on timing and context. Villages attempting the deception during major military campaigns, when Mongol forces were focused on strategic objectives and operating under time pressure, had better success rates than those encountered during slower reconnaissance missions or occupation phases when thorough investigation was more likely. You learn that the psychological preparation proved as important as physical staging. Villagers who truly embraced their death through meditation and mental discipline maintained more convincing poses than those who merely tried to lie still, while remaining mentally active. The ability to transcend normal reflexes and responses required genuine alteration of consciousness, not simple acting. The conversation turns to practical considerations for the future. The Mongol army will likely return along this route within weeks or months, and Zhao Ping cannot repeat the same deception without arousing suspicion. Dead villages don't resurrect themselves, and evidence of renewed activity would immediately brand the settlement as hostile. Territory requiring subjugation or destruction. Old Master Liu proposes 3 options for the village's future survival. First, complete relocation to territory beyond Mongol reach, though such places are increasingly rare as the empire expands. Second, genuine submission to Mongol authority, accepting vassal status in exchange for protection and the right to continue existing. Third, preparation for conventional defense, building fortifications and gathering weapons for a final stand. Each option carries severe risks and costs. Relocation means abandoning ancestral homes, fertile fields, and everything that makes Zhu Ping worth preserving. Submission guarantees survival, but at the cost of independence and cultural identity. Fighting offers the possibility of maintaining freedom, but against odds that make victory virtually impossible. The discussion continues through the night as villagers weigh their limited options against uncertain futures. Your successful deception bought precious time for these deliberations, but time itself cannot solve the fundamental problem of existing in the path of an expanding empire that tolerates no independent settlements within its claimed territories. As dawn approaches, you find yourself reflecting on the extraordinary experience of playing dead while surrounded by warriors who have conquered nations. The psychological intensity of maintaining absolute stillness while instruments of death tested your prone form created memories that will echo through your remaining years. However many or few they might be, the deception succeeded because it exploited the intersection of Mongol military efficiency and human psychological tendencies. By presenting exactly what experienced conquerors expected to find in a plague-struck village, Zhu Ping's performance bypassed suspicion and triggered routine. Protocols for handling settlements have no military value, but success also revealed the fragility of such strategies. A single involuntary movement, one detail out of place, or a moment of bad luck could have doomed everyone. The margin for error was non-existent, and the psychological pressure of knowing that hundreds of lives depended on perfect execution created stress levels that few human beings ever experience. The broader implications of your village's experience illuminate the desperate creativity that emerges when ordinary people face overwhelming threats. Throughout history, communities have developed remarkable survival strategies when confronted with forces too powerful to resist through conventional means. Zhao Ping's deception represents one example of human ingenuity applied to the fundamental challenge of continued existence. You realize that the success of playing dead as a survival strategy depends on understanding your enemy's priorities, expectations, and operational procedures. The Mongols bypassed your village not because they were fooled by amateur theatrics, but because your deception aligned perfectly with their established protocols for handling routine situations encountered during military campaigns. The knowledge that some Chinese villages successfully employed this strategy during actual Mongol invasions adds historical weight to your fictional experience. Real communities faced identical choices under comparable circumstances, and some made the same desperate gamble that saved Xiaoping. Their stories, largely lost to history, represent untold thousands of individuals who chose elaborate deception over futile resistance or certain death. As the morning sun rises over your village, you understand that playing dead was never really about fooling the Mongols. It was about buying time, creating opportunities, and maintaining hope in the face of seemingly impossible odds. The deception worked not because it was perfect, but because it offered a third option when only two seemed available: submit or die. The experience transforms your understanding of survival, courage, and the lengths to which ordinary people will go to protect their communities. Lying motionless for 12 hours, while heavily armed warriors tested your prone form, required a form of bravery, entirely different from charging into battle or standing defiant in the face of threats. You're successful. Deception becomes part of village folklore, a story that will be told and retold as long as Xiaoping exists. But more importantly, it demonstrates that survival sometimes requires abandoning conventional notions of dignity, heroism, and appropriate responses to danger. Sometimes the wisest course of action is to become invisible, to present no threat, worth addressing, to fade into the landscape until danger passes. The Mongol army continues its campaign, carrying no memory of the unremarkable dead village it bypassed during routine operations. Your names will never appear in their chronicles. Your resistance will never be recorded in their histories, and your survival will remain forever invisible to the forces that nearly destroyed you. In this case, invisibility represents the ultimate victory. As Xiaoping slowly returns to normal life, you carry with you the profound knowledge that you've participated in one of history's most unusual survival strategies. The experience of playing dead while surrounded by living death has changed you in ways that will take years to fully understand. But you're alive to process those changes, and in the context of Mongol expansion, that outcome represents extraordinary success. The day stretches ahead with all the mundane beauty of ordinary existence: crops to tend, meals to prepare, conversations to share with neighbors who yesterday lay motionless beside you in elaborate deception. The normal rhythms of village life resume, but underneath flows the current of shared experience that bonds your community in ways that peaceful times never could. You know that other communities throughout the Mongol Empire's expansion faced similar choices, and some chose the same desperate gamble. Their successes and failures remain largely unrecorded, but their courage in attempting such elaborate deceptions represents a fascinating chapter in humanity's ongoing struggle to survive in the face of overwhelming force. The historical reality that some Chinese villages actually employed this strategy during Genghis Khan's campaigns adds authenticity to your imagined experience. Real people made these desperate calculations, dug these convincing graves, practiced these death poses, and lay motionless while their lives hung in the balance of professional military assessment. Your village's successful deception joins in on it. Untold number of similar stories scattered throughout history, communities that chose creativity over conventional resistance, who found third options when only two seemed available, who survived by becoming temporarily invisible to forces too powerful to confront directly. As afternoon shadows lengthen across Xiaoping, you reflect on the broader lessons embedded in your experience. Playing dead as a survival strategy succeeded because it required no resources your village didn't possess, no weapons you couldn't obtain, no training beyond what desperate necessity could provide. It worked because it transformed your greatest weakness, complete inability to resist Mongol military power, into a strength that removed you from their immediate concerns. The deception's success depended on perfect understanding of your enemy's perspective, priorities, and operational procedures. By thinking like Mongol commanders rather than Chinese villagers, your community developed a strategy that exploited the intersection of military efficiency and human psychology. You succeeded by becoming exactly what experienced conquerors expected. To find in a plague-ravaged settlement. Evening approaches, and the village gathers for a meal that tastes sweeter than any food you've previously experienced. Every bite represents victory over impossible odds. Every conversation celebrates survival against forces that have toppled empires. The ordinary miracle of continued existence takes on profound meaning when measured against the alternative of complete annihilation. Old Master Liu offers a final reflection on the day's events as villagers prepare for their first normal night's sleep since learning of the approaching army. Today we learned that sometimes the greatest courage lies not in fighting or fleeing, but in becoming nothing at all. We survived by embracing death so completely that death itself passed us by. His words capture the essential paradox of your survival strategy. By accepting death as completely as possible without actually dying, you achieved a form of invisibility that proved more effective than walls, weapons, or desperate flight. Mongols bypassed Zhaofeng not because they failed to notice the village, but because they noticed exactly what they expected to see and found nothing worth additional attention. The stars emerge overhead as you prepare for sleep, and you realize that tomorrow will bring new challenges, but also new possibilities. The time bought by today's deception must be used wisely, whether for relocation, preparation, or finding other creative solutions to the ongoing problem of existing in the path of imperial expansion. That your successful experience playing dead becomes a permanent part of who you are, a proof that ordinary people can sometimes overcome extraordinary challenges through creativity, courage, and perfect execution of desperate plans. A memory will sustain you through whatever difficulties lie ahead. A reminder that survival sometimes requires abandoning every assumption about appropriate responses to overwhelming danger. As sleep approaches, you carry with you the profound satisfaction of having participated in one of history's most unusual victories. No songs will celebrate your triumph, no monuments will commemorate your courage, and no histories will record your names. But you're alive, your community survives, and tomorrow the sun will rise on a village that shouldn't exist, but does because, sometimes, the impossible becomes possible when ordinary people refuse to accept that only two choices exist. The night settles over Zhaoping like a blanket, peaceful and quiet in ways that seemed impossible just hours ago. You drift towards sleep, knowing that you've experienced something extraordinary, something that connects you to countless other communities throughout history that chose creative survival over conventional resistance. Your success proves that human ingenuity can sometimes find paths through situations that appear to offer no hope of continuation. In your dreams, You'll probably relive those 12 hours of motionless terror, feeling again the spear points testing, your death pose, and hearing the voices of professional warriors evaluating your prone form. But those nightmares will fade, while the knowledge that you survived through courage and creativity will remain forever. You played dead and lived to tell about it. And in the context of facing Mongol military power, that represents perhaps the greatest victory any ordinary person could achieve. Your successful deception joins the ranks of history's most remarkable survival stories, proof that sometimes the most effective resistance involves offering no resistance at all. By becoming temporarily invisible, Zhao Ping achieved what armies and fortifications could not continue existence in the face of overwhelming force. The strategy worked because it recognized that survival sometimes requires abandoning every conventional notion of appropriate responses to mortal danger. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, but tonight you sleep as one of history's most unusual victors. You face down the Mongol war machine not with sword and shield, but with absolute stillness and perfect discipline. You won by losing yourself so completely in the performance of death that death itself was convinced and moved on to seek more active prey. The experience transforms your understanding of courage, resistance, and the extraordinary lengths to which ordinary people will go to protect their communities. Playing dead while surrounded by professional killers required a form of bravery that has no name in conventional military terminology, but its effectiveness speaks to the power of human creativity when applied to the fundamental challenge of continued existence. As consciousness fades into peaceful sleep, you know that you've participated in something that will echo through generations of storytelling, a testament to the power of human ingenuity when facing impossible odds. The weeks that follow your successful deception bring both relief and mounting tension. Zhu Ping has gained precious time, but everyone understands that this respite is temporary. The Mongol army continues its campaign across the region, and reports from fleeing refugees paint increasingly grim pictures of settlements that chose resistance over submission. You spend your days helping to implement the village's chosen survival strategy. After extensive deliberation, Old Master Liu and the village council decided on a combination approach: partial relocation for the most vulnerable residents, while the remainder prepares for genuine submission should the Mongols return. It's a pragmatic decision that acknowledges the harsh realities of imperial expansion while preserving as much of the community as possible. The children and elderly begin their journey to mountain villages beyond the immediate reach of Mongol expansion, carrying with them the cultural knowledge and traditions that make Shuping more than just a collection of buildings. You watch them disappear into the morning mist, understanding that you may never see some of them again, but taking comfort in knowing that part of your community will survive regardless of what happens to those who remain. Those staying behind begin the delicate process of preparing for legitimate surrender. This requires its own form of elaborate preparation, gathering tribute that demonstrates the village's value without appearing to have been concealed during the previous plague, preparing leaders who can negotiate terms without revealing the earlier deception, and establishing narratives that explain the village's apparent recovery from whatever catastrophe the Mongols previously observed. The psychological challenge of this transition proves almost as difficult as playing dead. After successfully convincing themselves and their enemies that they were deceased, villagers must now embrace life so completely that their vitality appears genuine rather than suspicious. The mental discipline required for this transformation reveals new depths of human adaptability. When survival depends on perfect performance, you find yourself appointed as one of the village's tribute bearers, responsible for presenting offerings. That will hopefully satisfy Mongol expectations while preserving enough resources for the community's continued existence. The role requires intimate knowledge of what conquering armies value most, not just gold and silver, but also practical goods like preserved foods, quality textiles, and skilled craftsmen who can contribute to imperial expansion. The preparation of tribute involves careful psychological calculation. Too little, and the Mongols may suspect the village is holding back resources, prompting destructive searches that could reveal evidence of the earlier deception. Too much, and they may wonder how a settlement recently devastated by plague managed to accumulate such wealth so quickly. The offering must strike a precise balance that satisfies imperial expectations while maintaining narrative consistency. As you help prepare the tribute goods, you reflect on the strange irony of your situation. Weeks ago, you played dead so convincingly that professional warriors passed you by without suspicion. Now you must demonstrate such vibrant life and productivity that those same forces will find value in preserving your community rather than destroying it. Both performances require absolute commitment to roles that could mean death if executed imperfectly. The Mongol army's return comes sooner than expected. Scout reports indicate their approach while morning mist still clings to the rice paddies, giving the village barely enough time to assume positions for the surrender ceremony. Unlike the previous encounter, this time you must be visibly, actively, enthusiastically alive. Now you take your position among the tribute bearers as the army crests a hill overlooking Zhouping. The sight is just as terrifying as before. Thousands of mounted warriors moving in perfect formation, their armor glinting in the early sunlight, their discipline evident in every synchronized movement. But this time, instead of hiding from their approach, you must demonstrate eager submission to their authority. The general who previously examined your corpse rides at the head of the column, and you wonder if he recognizes the terrain from his earlier passage. His expression reveals nothing as he surveys the now obviously living village, but his tactical mind must be processing the implications of finding activity where he previously confirmed death. Old Master Liu steps forward as the designated village spokesman, his aged frame trembling with what could be interpreted as either fear or excitement at the prospect of serving the great Khan. His performance begins immediately, praising Mongol power while explaining Zhouping's miraculous recovery from the plague that nearly destroyed the community during their previous passage. Great warriors of the eternal blue sky, he calls out in accented but understandable Mongol, a skill he apparently possessed but kept hidden during the deception phase. Our village has been blessed by the spirits with recovery from the terrible sickness that struck us. We live now only to serve the mighty Khan and contribute to his glorious conquests. The general's response reveals nothing of his thoughts as he dismounts and approaches the assembled villagers. His eyes move across faces that he may or may not remember from their previous motionless state, searching for inconsistencies that would indicate deception. You maintain an expression of humble eagerness while internally marveling at the complexity of emotions required for this performance. The tribute presentation becomes a carefully orchestrated display of submission and value. You step forward with other bearers, offering silk textiles that demonstrate the village's weaving skills, preserved foods that show agricultural productivity, and small amounts of silver that suggest modest prosperity without implying hidden wealth. Each item must tell part of a coherent story about a community worth preserving. The general examines the offerings with professional interest, but his attention seems focused more on the people than the goods. His eyes linger on faces, studying expressions and body language with the analytical mind of someone trained to detect deception. You realize that this examination may be even more dangerous than playing dead, because now he's looking for signs of life rather than death. The questioning begins with seemingly casual inquiries about the village's recovery from plague, the source of current prosperity, and the community's attitude toward Mongol rule. Old Master Liu fields these questions with masterful skill, weaving a narrative that acknowledges the previous devastation while explaining current vitality in terms of spiritual intervention and desperate hard work by plague survivors. You listen to this elaborate fiction while marveling at its psychological sophistication. The story explains every discrepancy between the village's previous dead state and current obvious life, providing rational explanations for rapid recovery that don't challenge Mongol intelligence while offering compelling reasons for preservation rather than destruction. The general's questions become more specific and pointed, probing details that only genuine plague survivors would know. How many died? Where are they buried? What symptoms did the sickness display? How did the survivors avoid infection? Each answer must align with evidence the Mongols observed during their previous visit, while maintaining narrative consistency. About miraculous recovery, Old Master Liu's responses demonstrate deep understanding of both plague pathology and Mongol expectations. He described symptoms consistent with diseases the army has encountered in other territories, burial practices that explain the graves they previously examined, and survival methods that appear plausible without seeming too convenient. The interrogation continues for what feels like hours, with questions ranging from practical concerns about agricultural productivity to philosophical inquiries about the village's attitude toward imperial expansion. You realize that this conversation will determine not just Xiaoping's immediate fate, but potentially establish precedents for how the Mongol Empire handles communities that demonstrate successful recovery from apparent devastation. As the sun climbs toward its zenith, the general appears to reach some internal conclusion about your village's status. His demeanor shifts subtly from suspicious examination to administrative evaluation, suggesting that he's moved beyond questioning the community's legitimacy to assessing its potential value within imperial structures. The terms of submission, when they finally emerge, prove more generous than anyone dared hope. Zhu Ping will provide annual tribute of agricultural products and textiles, contribute a small number of young men for military service, and accept a minimal Mongol administrative presence. In exchange, the village receives protection, trading, privileges, and the right to maintain its essential cultural practices. You participate in the formal submission ceremony that follows, kneeling alongside your neighbors, as Old Master Liu officially surrenders village independence to Mongol authority. The ritual feels surreal after your recent experience playing dead in the same location, but you understand that this ceremony represents genuine victory rather than defeat. Your community will survive with most of its identity intact. The Mongol garrison that remains in Xiaoping consists of only a handful of administrators and guards, their presence more symbolic than oppressive. They establish quarters in buildings volunteered by the village council and begin the process of integrating your community into imperial communication and taxation networks. The transition proves remarkably smooth, suggesting that the Mongol Empire's success stems partly from pragmatic administration rather than pure military force. Over the following months, you discover that life under Mongol rule brings unexpected benefits alongside its obvious costs. Trade opportunities expand dramatically as imperial roads and protection networks open markets previously beyond reach. Young men who join Mongol forces send back wealth and stories from distant campaigns. Cultural exchange with other subject peoples introduces new ideas and technologies. The annual tribute obligations prove manageable rather than crushing, reflecting Mongol understanding that productive communities generate more long-term value than devastated ones. Your village's agricultural output actually increases thanks to improved irrigation techniques learned from other imperial subjects, while textile production benefits from access to new materials and dyes transported along expanded trade routes. Sometimes wonder what happened to other communities that chose different survival strategies during the Mongol expansion. Villages that resisted were certainly destroyed, their populations scattered or eliminated. Settlements that fled may have found temporary safety, but lost everything that made them distinctive communities. Only those that successfully navigated the complex challenge of submission seem to have preserved meaningful continuity. The psychological adjustment, too, Mongol rule proves more complex than the practical adaptations. After experiencing the terror of potential annihilation, followed by the stress of elaborate deception, the relative normalcy of imperial administration feels almost anticlimactic. You survived one of history's most effective military machines, only to discover that the conquerors were more interested in productive subjects than dead enemies. Your successful experience playing dead becomes part of village folklore, though the story must be told carefully to avoid reaching Mongol ears. The tale serves as a reminder of human creativity under extreme pressure, while also illustrating the importance of understanding your enemies deeply enough to exploit their expectations and priorities. The broader implications of your community's survival strategy continue to resonate as you observe imperial expansion throughout the region. Other villages that attempted similar deceptions with less preparation or execution were discovered and destroyed, their failures serving as grim reminders of how narrow the margin for error actually was in such desperate gambles. You realize that Xu Ping's success resulted from a unique combination of factors: old Master Liu's inherited knowledge, the community's willingness to commit completely to the deception, favorable timing during a major military campaign, and perhaps most importantly, luck that their performance aligned perfectly with Mongol expectations for plague-devastated settlements. Historical reality that some Chinese villages actually employed this strategy during Genghis Khan's campaigns adds weight to your fictional experience. Real communities faced identical choices under comparable circumstances, and their successes and failures shaped the course of imperial expansion in ways that most histories never record. As seasons pass and life under Mongol rule becomes routine, you occasionally encounter travelers who share stories from other regions of the expanding empire. These tales reveal the full scope of choices faced by communities in the path of conquest, submission, resistance, flight, or in rare cases, elaborate deception. Your village chose wisely, but you understand that wisdom alone wasn't sufficient for survival. The young people of Xiaoping who grow up under imperial rule will never fully understand the terror and desperation that drove their elders to attempt such an extraordinary deception. For them, Mongol administration represents normality rather than the alternative to annihilation. Their perspective reminds you that survival sometimes requires not just preserving life, but also accepting fundamental changes in how that life is lived. The skills you developed during those 12 hours of playing, dead absolute stillness, emotional control under extreme pressure, and the ability to commit completely to necessary roles, prove surprisingly useful in daily life under imperial rule. The psychological discipline required for successful deception translates into valuable capabilities for navigating the complex social and political realities of subject status. Your village's tribute obligations provide regular reminders of the price paid for survival, but they also demonstrate the pragmatic nature of Mongol administration. The empire's success depended on maintaining productive subjects rather than ruling over wastelands, creating incentives for policies that preserved, rather than destroyed, valuable communities. The administrative integration of Xiaoping into imperial structures reveals the sophistication of Mongol governance systems. Your village becomes part of communication networks that span continents, taxation systems that fund massive military campaigns, and cultural exchange mechanisms that blend traditions from dozens of conquered peoples. As you reflect on your extraordinary experience of playing dead to survive Mongol conquest, you understand that the strategy's success stemmed from perfect alignment between desperate necessity and enemy psychology. Your community succeeded because you understood exactly what the conquerors expected to find and provided that precise experience without deviation or embellishment. The memory of lying motionless while professional warriors tested your prone form remains vivid years later, a permanent reminder of human capability under impossible pressure. That experience transformed your understanding of courage, creativity, and the lengths to which ordinary people will go to protect their communities from overwhelming threats. Your successful deception joins countless similar stories scattered throughout history, communities that found third options when only two seemed available, that chose temporary invisibility over feudal resistance, that survived by becoming exactly what their enemies expected rather than what they actually were. The village of Yaoping continues its existence under Mongol rule, its survival a testament to the power of desperate creativity applied to seemingly impossible challenges. Your names will never appear in imperial histories. Your resistance will never be recorded in official chronicles. But your community endures, because sometimes the greatest victory lies in avoiding the fight entirely. As evening approaches, and you prepare for another peaceful night's sleep under the protection of the same forces that once threatened your existence, you carry with you the profound satisfaction of having participated in one of history's most unusual survival strategies. You played dead and lived to tell about it, proving that human ingenuity can sometimes overcome even the most overwhelming odds through perfect understanding of enemy, psychology, and flawless execution of desperate plans. The twilight settles over, your village like a gentle embrace, and you find yourself standing at the edge of the rice paddies where this extraordinary journey began. The water reflects the last golden rays of sunlight, creating ripples that seem to carry whispers of all the villages that didn't make it, all the communities that chose different paths through the maze of survival when faced with unstoppable conquest. If you enjoyed this ride, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear about your own experiences with impossible situations. Or just let me know what time it is where you're listening and how this story hit you. Maybe you've got your own tales of desperate creativity. Or perhaps you're wondering what other historical communities tried similar strategies against overwhelming odds. Until next time, keep your curiosity alive and your nights filled with wonder.